how to acclimate soft water fish to harder water. So there's lots of videos on YouTube how to acclimate your new fish when you bring them home, how to quarantine your new fish, how to drip acclimate fish, but there's almost no information and there's very little discussion on how to acclimate soft water fish to harder water. Why this is important? For a number of reasons. Some of you may think about buying some delicate soft water fish such as wild discus or maybe wild Altum angels or some other wild caught soft water fish, South American, Southeast Asian or West African species that are used to soft water, but your tap water in your fish tanks might be harder. It might be neutral at pH about 7.0, or it might be even much harder than that at around pH 8. So you would probably think twice before purchasing delicate soft water fish if you don't have soft water coming out of your tap. And acclimating this fish might be a bit of a challenge as well. So I think this topic is important. I think it's important to discuss these issues related to acclimation of soft water fish to harder water. So what seems to be the problem? There are fish that live in soft water and there are fish that live in hard water. Yes, I know that some hobbyists will say that you can just introduce soft water fish into hard water and the other way around, and there will be no problems, and soft water fish can generally live in hard water. Well, that's not exactly true, because soft water fish are used to live in acidic water that is deprived of minerals. So their organs, their osmoregulation is not used to process pretty much any minerals at all. So when you put soft water fish in hard water, they will have to deal with increased amount of minerals, mostly with calcium and with sodium as well. And their gills that usually process ions are not able to deal with this amount of minerals that they have to cope with all of a sudden. The same goes with hard water fish, because they are used to live in water rich with minerals, again with sodium and calcium. So if hard water fish are introduced into soft water, they are likely to have a lot of problems with osmoregulation, because they are not used to be in the water deprived of minerals. So the immune systems will drop both for soft water and hard water fish, and it is likely that they will be affected by various illnesses, various diseases, because of this situation when they are basically moved from an environment that they are used to into an environment that is absolutely new for them. You may not notice any changes. The changes may not be noticeable to a naked eye. You will not see that something is wrong is happening with your fish short term, but long term results will be eventually obvious after some period of time. So the fish will have their immune systems affected, and which means that lots of various diseases can affect this fish. So in this video I will be talking specifically about acclimating soft water fish to harder water, not necessarily very hard water, which is pH 8, 8.5 and above, but most likely to neutral water, which is about pH 7. I will not be talking about acclimating hard water fish to soft water, which is another side of this problem. One thing that I will mention is that it's much easier to acclimate soft water fish to harder water rather than hard water fish to soft water, because in that case hard water fish will be completely deprived of minerals that they are used to, particularly calcium. So the question is, can you actually do it? Can you acclimate soft water fish to harder water? You certainly can, but it's not an easy process. It will involve a bit of a work, and it will involve some effort. The other thing to keep in mind before we move any further is that even after you succeed in acclimating your soft water fish to harder water, to your tap water, most likely these fish will still require soft water in order to breed. So they may live in harder water, in neutral water, but in order to breed, in order for the eggs to hatch, they will need to be transferred to soft water. That's the case with most South American soft water fish. They will not breed, the eggs will not hatch in harder water. So the other important thing to consider before we move any further is whether do you actually have to acclimate soft water fish to your water. The thing is that a lot of wild caught soft water fish have already been acclimated to harder water before they get into your tank. So possibly even before they get to your aquatic store or online retailer from whom you're likely to buy them. In some cases your aquatic dealer will not even know about it. So what I'm talking about, when it comes to South American, Amazonian and Orinocan fish, when they are collected in the wild by fishermen, by collectors, they are obviously kept in the same water as in their habitats, in soft and acidic water, but in most cases they have to be transported to major cities in order to be shipped internationally. That is certainly the case with most of the Colombian fish collected in Orinoco and Rio Negro basins. It certainly refers to most of the Peruvian fish and quite a lot of Brazilian fish. Because there are no international airports close to the areas where the fish are collected, they have to be transported to major cities, in most cases capital cities, and the water hardness in these larger cities in South America, I talk about Colombia, I talk about Peru and Brazil, is much harder than it is in Amazonian region. So we're mostly talking about water with pH above 7.5, sometimes it goes all the way to 8. And while these fish await transportation, while they are being held in some temporary holding tanks by these distributor companies, they are kept in much harder water than they used to in their natural habitat. So they might spend several weeks, they might spend a month living in this harder water before they are being shipped to different countries. So that's when they already experience the first level of acclimation. Most of that acclimation occurs without any specific efforts involved on the part of this distributor companies. They simply do not provide soft water. They don't have access to reverse osmosis, RO water. So what they will do, they will just gradually transition soft water fish to their own tap water. And in most cases, soft water fish that we see for sale in our aquatic stores or online by aquatic dealers, they have already lived for a certain period of time in harder water. So by the time they get to your country, it is most likely that they've already been adapted to harder water. So when you get them from your aquatic dealer or from your online aquatic retailer, it's always worth inquiring what is their water hardness and at which water hardness they have kept this fish. So quite possibly you don't have to do anything by this stage because these fish have already been acclimated. But let's imagine a situation when you actually have to acclimate soft water fish to hard water, when you receive the fish that has been kept in soft water either by your aquatic dealer, although that doesn't happen very often. Most aquatic dealers try to keep the fish in the tap water. Sometimes they mix tap water with RO water, but in most cases they will try to acclimate this fish before it gets to you. But let's imagine that you do have to acclimate that fish yourself. So what do you have to do? Well, one thing to keep in mind, that if you live in areas where tap water is particularly hard, and I'm talking about pH 8 or 8.5 or even above, you will certainly have to use RO water, reverse osmosis. You will pretty much have no other options. You can also use rainwater if you live in clean areas, and you can collect rainwater. It's usually quite acidic and very soft. You will need to filter it with carbon to remove all sort of chemical elements, but you can certainly use rainwater. So if you live in areas with really hard water, it's either RO or rainwater. There's pretty much no other options. So the plan will be then to gradually mix RO water with your tap water, so-called mineralization process. So you will be adding your tap water after each water change, little by little, and instead of our water, you will be increasing the amount of your tap water after each water change. And I would advise to stretch this process possibly over 2 or 3 months, so that the change doesn't happen gradually. And even after that period of time, I would still advise you to use a certain amount of RO water during your water changes, so to keep the water hardness at least at pH 7 or 7.5, not letting it go up to 8 and above 8, because even if your soft water fish is already acclimated to harder water, they will still find it relatively hard to cope with the pH 8 or above, and that particularly refers to discus and Altum angels. And even for European bred discus such as Stenker discus, you can see the Stenker requirements. They advise you to keep the fish at pH 7 and preferably not above 7. The same would go with captive bred Altum angels. They would handle pH 7, 7.5, but certainly preferably not higher than that. Well, alright, but if you have a neutral tap water, or if you have tap water that's closer to neutral, I'm talking about pH 7 or pH 6.5, what you can do is you can try to acidify your water. So you can add some bogwood, fresh bogwood, driftwood, you can add some leaf litter, all sorts of leaf litter, you can add alder cones. They will stain your water, they will leach tannins, so your water will be tea colored or even coffee colored, but it will acidify it. You have to keep in mind that after each water change you will have to add more botanicals, more leaf litter and more alder cones in order to keep the same levels of acidity. So certainly if you have softer or neutral tap water, you don't have to try to artificially lower your pH, particularly using any chemicals or using any pH lowering products, which will be probably much worse than just keeping the conditions stable and just trying to acidify your water rather than lowering pH. For most wild-caught soft water fish, a gradual transition from the hardness that they are used to in their natural habitats, which is pH 4.5 to 5 to pH about 6.5, will be quite normal, and they can handle it. This is particularly relevant to South American fish because they live through two various seasons, dry season and wet season, and the water hardness differs between these two seasons. So it might go up during one season and it might go down a bit during the other season. So for wild discus, for lots of wild South American fish, black water species, also Altum angels, they are quite used to relatively limited pH fluctuations during different seasons, so they will handle gradual pH changes, not 2 or 3 degrees pH change, but just about 1.5 degree pH change that is done very gradually. They will handle it quite easily and they can adapt to it without any problems. Alright, and the last thing to consider when acclimating your soft water fish to harder water, to your tap water, is that species and age actually matter. So some species are easier to acclimate to harder water than others. For example, some Southeast Asian fish such as Rasbora species, Betta species, Sundadanio species that live in their natural habitats in peat swamps, in all sort of tiny pools, black water tiny pools that have very stable static conditions throughout the year. They always have this acidic water, so they're not very used to hardness changes, to pH changes, and so it's much harder to acclimate them as compared to, for example, South American fish such as wild discus, Altum angels, wild types of angelfish, tetras, and all sorts of soft water species of plecos, because they are more used to pH fluctuations and changes in hardness, so it will be easier to acclimate them as compared to fish that come from very static habitats. That's why it's always worth doing some research on the natural habitat that your fish come from. Age of your fish is also important, because younger fish are more adaptable than older fish, so they still their bodies, their osmoregulation systems have not yet fully adapted to a particular set of conditions. That's why it's easier to transition them to a different hardness, water hardness, and they're easier to adapt as compared to older fish, and particularly old fish. And so that's why it's better to buy younger fish if you can, because they will be easier to acclimate to your conditions. So to summarize, in most cases you may not need to adapt to acclimate soft water fish to your conditions, because they may have already been acclimated to harder water, to your local tap water by your aquatic dealer or by distributor companies that usually sell and ship this wild fish around the world. So in many cases the fish, soft water fish that you see for sale in your aquatic store or online, they may have already been acclimated to harder water. And again, when I talk about harder water, I refer mostly to neutral pH, pH 7, 7.5. If you have to adapt the soft water fish to your pH, to your higher water, you have to do it gradually. Again, if you have higher pH, you will need to use RO water or rainwater. If you have neutral water, you may need to acidify it by adding botanicals and by adding fresh driftwood and alder cones and so on. So again, all these processes need to be very gradual. You really need to be patient. You will probably have to spend 2 or 3 months acclimating soft water fish to harder water. If your tap water is particularly hard, and I'm talking about pH 8 or 8.5, in that case you will really have to work hard on acclimating them temporarily. But eventually your fish will get used to live in this hard water if you do it slowly and gradually. They will not breed in this water. You will need to use RO water, or you will need to use some other ways to soften your water in order for the eggs to hatch, but they should be able to live in this water quite successfully for a long period of time. Alright, I hope this video was useful. Leave your comments if you have any experiences with acclimating soft water fish, or if you have any questions, of course, and I will see you soon.